Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. The Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, has said that there is no going back on its stand concerning its refusal to be included in the federal government's integrated payroll and personnel information system, IPPIS. Meanwhile, a faction of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, the Congress of University Academics, CONUA, directed its members to begin enrollment on the IPPIS system that ASUU earlier rejected. The federal government had earlier directed all lecturers on its payroll to register themselves on the platform, adding that any lecturer that refused to be captured on the IPPIS should forget receiving a monthly salary beginning from October 2019. But ASUU rejected the government's idea, arguing that the electronic payroll system violates university autonomy and does not capture the peculiarities of their profession. Dr. Dele Ashiru, Chairman, ASUU University of Lagos Chapter, joins us to discuss this and more.
Good morning, Dr. Ashiru, welcome to the morning show.
Good morning, thank you for this invitation.
Yeah, quickly, I mean, we've taken on this subject for quite a while on this program. And you can be sure we have our own opinions, and we're very glad that you are here. How does enrollment on IPPIS, how does it violate university autonomy? And why has it been so difficult for ASUU and the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation? Why is it so difficult to reach some kind of understanding? Because what we had was that a template will be worked out to accommodate the concerns of ASUU. But your faction of ASUU, seems to be determined. You've taken, a no work, no pay rule decision. You said we no go agree, as Nigerians will put it.
Well, I think let me start by clarifying the fact that there's no faction in ASUU.
No, there is Congress of Nigerian Academics.
It's a separate...
They are also academics.
Yeah, but it's a separate organization of a group of individuals who says they are not satisfied with the procedures in ASUU, and they are forming another organization called CONUA. Having said that, the IPPIS system violates the university autonomy because, like you know, universities are universal citadels of learning where knowledge is produced and disseminated. If you have an accountant general of the federation who determines who to be recruited, how the person is recruited is to be paid, very soon they will begin to determine, in fact, what constitutes the curriculum of these universities. So we are saying that this autonomy has been granted by law, and no directive of anybody, including the president in a democracy, should supersede a law that has been freely passed. Now, talking about the promise of the Accountant General to factor in the peculiarities of the universities, a stakeholders meeting was called where the current template was displayed. And as you may be aware, all of the experts, they are in the university. And I am in the public sphere. The Deputy Vice Chancellor of University of Jos, who himself, a computer expert, raised a few questions about the template. And the consultants were unable to respond to these challenges. Indeed, that was the reason why ASUU is now saying that, look, if it is impossible for you to respond to the peculiarities of the universities, let us develop a template that can take care of all of these peculiarities and would also achieve the same purpose which the whole idea about IPPIS purports to achieve. One point I would also like to make is that we must begin to come to terms with the democratic procedures, no matter how difficult it may appear. In a democratic system, if a section of the society kicks against a government policy, what is appropriate is to sit down and discuss these peculiarities. It is not for either government or the Accountant General of the Federation to keep talking in the manner in which they are doing. You either take it or leave it. If you don't get enrolled, you don't get paid. I think that these are statements that are inconsistent with democratic tenets.
Right. So I went through the University of Lagos Act, and in particular sections 4, 7, and the 4th schedule come to mind, which gives University of Lagos autonomy over its resources, its finances, and what have you. But how is this contradicted by this request to enroll in IPPIS? It does not actually mean that the federal government is going to intervene in the affairs of the universities per se. So let's talk about that and why you feel that that threat exists. Also, it was reported that ASUU was asked to present a suitable template. Why has that not been done? And thirdly, you have said just now that you don't appreciate the manner in which this has been approached by the federal government, but is the extension from October to November not a sign of good faith? Why do you feel that you're being dictated to rather than negotiated with?
Okay, let me start with the law. The University of Lagos Act vests in the Governing Council, as you had pointed out, recruitment, management of funds, etc. And that had been the practice until, this conscious attempt to tinker with the entire university system. Now, taking payroll out of the purview of the university to the office of the Accountant General certainly excludes the Governing Council, takes away the powers of the Governing Council to superintend over these areas that are provided by law. Now, the extension to November, when it became obvious that the IPPIS, indeed going by the experiences of those that are currently enrolled on it, it was our union that offered to produce a template. It was not that we were asked to do so. And that template is being fine-tuned to be presented before the Senate President, who actually brokered some truths and asked that status quo ante be maintained. But we were shocked that the Accountant General is now saying that if you don't get enrolled by 5th December, you forfeit your salary and all that. I think that this is really not the way to go about this matter.
Okay, but we still need to get to the crux of the matter on why this integrated payroll system came out as such a disturbance to ASUU to begin with. Because on the face of it, for someone like me that would see it in the media and read the reports, all it looks like is a way to really clean up the way people are paid, make sure we can get rid of ghost workers, make sure that the system is clear and transparent and the money can actually be accounted for. That is what it looks like. So one would just wonder generally why it comes across as such a threat, like Tundu had pointed out, to ASUU to begin with. Why is there that issue? I understand putting your own templates across. I understand negotiation. But what is the initial threat of a system that actually does look very transparent and really does look like progress? It looks like something to commend the government over.
Well, thank you. That's a very good question. To start with, yes, on the service value and going by government's narrative, IPPIS, clean up the system, eradicate ghost workers and all that. But these are just mere narratives. Those narratives don't support the facts. On Monday, that's about 2 days ago, our union caused a paid advertorial in the Guardian and the Nation newspapers, where we did an X-ray of the IPPIS. And in fact, by the admission of the World Bank, one of the progenitors of this system, the program, its implementation is not functioning well in Nigeria, just like other government policies. That's one. Number two is that they talk about ghost workers. They talk about saving billions of naira who have been prosecuted on account of, piling the payroll The several billions of naira that is claimed to have been, where is it? On what? So, if the accountant general, he who comes to equity must come with clean hand. The accountant general must explain to Nigerians where the money that has been saved is, or what has been done with the money in very clear terms. Our contention is that government policies in Nigeria, including IPPIS, let me even say that the IPPIS program, please, has two platforms.
Dr. Ashuru, if I may interrupt, you will continue subsequently, but we need to take a short commercial break now. When we return, the conversation will continue. You're still watching The Morning Show here on Arise News. We'll be right back. You're still watching The Morning Show here on the Arise News channel. And we still have with us in our Lagos studio Dr. Dele Ashuru, Chairman of the University of Lagos chapter of the Academic Staff Union of Universities in Nigeria, ASUU. And he's been talking about the controversy over the proposed enrollment of university teachers on IPPIS, the Integrated Personnel and Payment Information System of Nigeria. Now, Dr. Ashuru, you were saying something. I would like you to conclude your thoughts about those 2 points you wanted to raise. But talking about autonomy, I think you may need to help us clarify it further. Because you said, look, if the federal government is allowed to enroll university teachers on its IP system, that what you will have is that federal government will now begin to interfere with recruitment, with curriculum, and all of that. But nobody on the federal government side has talked about interfering with recruitment or curriculum. I think we should be clear about that. And the Universities Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 2003 or the University Autonomy Act of 2007 does not talk about government interfering. You know, it gives powers to the governing council. But in other countries of the world, when you talk about autonomy with regard to academic activities and, you know, funding of the university, they also talk about financial autonomy. So why is ASUU saying, you know, many of these are universities, they don't fund themselves. You know, the universities are dependent on government, either state or federal, for payment of salaries. So if the body paying the salaries says, look, for purposes of transparency and accountability, as Leila pointed out, we need a proper register. We need a proper personal information system to be able to pay properly and eliminate goals and have transparency and accountability. Why would the employee now insist on dictating how he or she should be paid? In other universities in the world, they raise funds and, you know, do their own processes, finance their own research. So isn't there a contradiction here? But conclude your thoughts before you address the question I've raised.
Okay, thank you. The IPPIS platform has two modules, the human resource module and the payroll module. The federal government are not talking about the human resource module. And they're now empowering the Accountant General Office to take on the two responsibilities. Whereas the idea of the designers of the module is to separate so that there can be control. Unlike government policies in Nigeria, take, for example, the cashless policy. We were told will help, you know, create efficiency in the system, mop up cash and all that. But today, if you try to do business in a cashless manner, it's to your own detriment. You pay. So that gives you the impression that in Nigeria, you take government policies not on its surface value, but in its holistic term. Having said that, let me categorically say here that in a neo-colonial Nigeria, it is the business of the state to educate its people. And that is why the comparison about how universities are funded elsewhere may not be applicable in Nigeria. This is to the extent that as part of our agreements with government and as part of making universities to be autonomous, we have suggested to government that as part of raising funds for the university, there are relevant faculties, expertise in the universities. Let them, create the enabling environment for them to be able to fund the system. Government itself has not allowed this. Now, coming back to the question of the person who is paying wants transparency and all that, our union is not against that. But what we are saying is that the current means of payment, lecturers in Nigeria today are being paid under what is called the GIF-mix. The GIF-mix guaranteed a situation where the salaries are prepared in respective universities according to their peculiarities. But payments are done from Abuja. So they could still monitor, they could see. Not only that, we have governing councils in respective universities, some of them appointed by government, particularly the chairman, whose responsibility is also to monitor and ensure transparency and accountability in the processes of the university. The fact that government is paying the bills of those who work in the university doesn't still remove the autonomy which universities have as citadels of knowledge production. Here, if we were to subject, education to the forces of demand and supply, what it means is that education will be priced out of the majority of Nigerians. And our union is of the opinion that education is a right which is guaranteed by the Nigerian Constitution. And therefore, government must live up to its billing of educating its people. And government cannot abdicate that responsibility.
Indeed. I wanted to ask you just mentioned now that the government does not allow universities to generate their own funds. Please, can you expand on that? And secondly, you wouldn't be here if you were not concerned by public opinion. You're here to explain the situation from your point of view. But I hope that you're also aware that there's a lot of tension amongst Nigerians at this kind of stalemate between ASUU and the federal government and threats that ASUU will go on strike. You have just said how important education is. If ASUU does decide to go as far as a strike, it's the students that will suffer.
Let me respond quickly to, this point. ASUU has not said it's going on strike. What we have said is, if you stop our salary, we will not work.
No work, no pay.
No pay, no work.
Okay.
We are paid in arrears. If I've worked for a month and you refuse to pay me, how do you expect me to continue to work? How do I get to my place of work? So we have not told anybody that we are going on strike. What we have simply responded to is the threat of government that if you don't get enrolled, you will not be paid. And if you don't pay us, we won't go to work. I think that is clear. Now, coming back to the question about government not allowing universities to generate funds. This is part of our agreements with government. And the agreement is you build theaters, lecture theaters in the university. You construct roads in the university. We have faculties of engineering, civil, electrical, all of that. We have faculties of architecture, building. Why not amend the Procurement Act and all relevant laws to allow these faculties, to engage in this construction? And rather than pay those who will come, get the money and not do the job, let these respective faculties do it by way of, generating resources, which is done in universities the world over.
And I guess to also allow those faculties to open bank accounts that may be unknown to government, that may not be declared.
No, because you see...
Because that's one problem that council has with some of these departments.
Today, in the universities have been enrolled under the TSA. And all funds go through the TSA. Indeed, all universities in Nigeria have consultancy outfits who, rather than being allowed to do some of these things, they are contracted out to people who really may not even have the expertise about doing it. So we need to take on these issues holistically. There are a number of researches rusting away in respective laboratories in Nigerian universities. The government doesn't care. That's not how the state functions in most of these other universities that we are referring to here.
Okay, but you said ASUU isn't going on strike. All ASUU is saying is no work, no pay.
No pay.
No pay, no work, sorry. But the government...
The government has said no work, no pay.
But the government is not saying no pay. The government is still giving your pay. The government is simply saying get your pay through these new means. ASUU hasn't even tried out the system. It seems as though ASUU is prejudging this system. So what I want to know is what is so different about this new proposed system that ASUU is bringing forward to the federal government as opposed to the IPPIS system that the federal government has opposed? Because like we said, public opinion on this matter does not really lie with ASUU on this. Most people are confused as to what ASUU's position really is.
Thank you very much. You see, as a union of intellectuals, we cannot shy away from our pivotal role in the society. It's just that those who are currently enrolled in the IPPIS system don't have the kind of courage that we do have to challenge the system. There is no ministry, department, or agencies of government enrolled on IPPIS that has any good thing to say about that platform. And you can make your own independent investigation. I give you an example. Should you have any challenge with your payment system, first, when you are those who are currently enrolled on the system, we were told your salaries will be irregular. You never can be sure of how much you will earn at the end of the month. Because, of course, the thing is done somewhere where nobody knows. Why is it that the so-called transparency and accountability that IPPIS and its proponents are talking about is not starting from the Accountant General's office? Now, that's one. Number two, should you have any problem, you have to travel to Abuja at your cost. And you have to remain there until that problem is resolved. And in this age and time, when we are talking about devolution of powers, we also think that it is incongruous for us now to still, be centralizing, including payroll. And we have told government, if what you are after is transparency, accountability, our union is not averse to that.
Dr. Ashiru, we have just about 3 minutes to go on this segment of the program. With due respect, I've been enrolled once on IPPIS. And some of the allegations that you brought up, like you may not get your salary and all of that, may not be true. Maybe ASUU needs to investigate further. But let me ask you, ASUU is just one of the many unions in the university system. Other unions are not protesting. They've embraced IPPIS. They are willing and they are ready, junior staff, senior staff. So why is it only ASUU that is proving difficult? You said, those other people, maybe they are not courageous enough. Are you referring to the other unions within the university system as a collection of cowards and ignoramuses who cannot see what the intellectuals are seeing?
No, please.
Yeah.
I specifically talked about ministries, departments, and agencies of government. And these categories of people you have mentioned don't fall within that. And they are just even beginning to enroll. And with due respect, you've been enrolled on IPPIS. At what level? If it's at the highest level, yes, if it's at that level of government, you know how it is in Nigeria. Nobody would, you can't get the kind of treatment that a lecturer 1 or a lecturer 2 officer or even an assistant lecturer will get from the same system. We know how these things work. And I have documentary evidence, testimonies of those who are currently on IPPIS and whose testimonies are not also confirming the assertion that you have made. Having said that, you see, in the university system, the lecturers are the critical stakeholders. All others who work in the university are supposed to support, that teaching arm of the university. Because if there are no teachers and students in a university, the best you can have is a research institute. And that will not be called a university. Well, so if the drivers of the system are challenging a policy, I think what is required is a dialogue.
Well, thank you. Dialogue, yes.
Thank
dialogue.
You very much.
Very important point. Thank you very much, Dr. ASUU.
Thank you.
That's all we'll be able to take on this segment.